So I got a special vacation book haul for everyone today. Me and the wife and the dog, we went over to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho for about a week. We got an Airbnb. My wife had to work a little bit during this time, but I took the whole time off. So I basically went to pretty much every bookstore in the area, a lot of the thrift stores, the library in Coeur d'Alene, and found all kinds of great stuff. And then on the second to the last day, we were up in Sandpoint, Idaho, and went to this bookshop. And if you saw the thumbnail, all those paperbacks that were in bags, I got them all from there. It was, I don't want to call it a once in a lifetime find because I hope to find something like this again. But let's just say I was at the right place at the right time. But we'll get to that at the end of this video. I'll save those books for last. But one of the first places we went to, we were waiting for a pizza, and there was this place called Entertain Mart, and I didn't really know much about it. Apparently it's kind of a chain that goes from Texas all the way up to Idaho and kind of straddles the kind of middle of America. And it was huge. It had new and used books and movies and music and video games, and it was way bigger than I thought. It was super packed. There was a lot of people in there, which was kind of a good sign. And they were having a deal, buy two, get one free. I didn't really expect to find much there, but I popped in really quick and I found some paperbacks, and I found this. I was really excited for this. This is a book I'd been looking for, The Best of Randall Garrett. And this was just a few dollars. I also got The War Hound and the World's Pain by Michael Moorcock. These are both pocketbook Timescape editions. And then I threw a little, since it was buy two, get one free, I also got this Robert L. Forward collection of short stories. But when I got home, it turned out I already had this. So I got it to get the deal, but I was really rushed on my first time through. So I went back the next day while the sale was still going on, and I spent a lot more time kind of going through all the shelves. And out on one of their tables, right in plain view in front of everyone, they had this copy of The Stand, and they were asking $11 for it. And when I first saw it, I was like, there's no way this could be a first edition. And it's a book club, as you can see here. But there's a gutter code in the back. If you know how these old Doubleday editions work, it's got a code of T45, which is the very first book club edition that came out of this. It's in really good condition, and since it was buy two, get one free, I effectively got it for about $9, and I'm sure it's worth considerably more than that. I don't have many plans to sell it. It's just in really good shape. But this is kind of a book that's near and dear to my heart. I'll show it compared to like a normal standard hardback here, because these Doubleday, the first 5 Stephen King books in Doubleday were a little bit shorter. And this book here, this uncut version of The Stand, is the book that I've owned and held on to the longest. I bought this brand new at Walden's Books when it came out in 1990. I was like 14 or 15. I paid $25 for it, which was a lot of money at the time for me. It took me a long time to read it, but I loved it. It's what kind of got me into post-apocalyptic fiction. And so this is kind of an interesting one. I'm going to hang on to it for now, but at some point I might sell that one or something. And then I went to a bunch of bookstores, pretty much only got paperbacks, but there was one hardback I got at a bookstore, and it's The Best of L. Sprague de Camp. And me and Richard and Matt are all reading this book right now. This is the next one we're going to be discussing soon. And I love the cover of that one, so I went ahead and picked that up. And then the rest of these book club editions all came from the Coeur d'Alene Library. We just popped in there just to check out the library. Didn't realize that they had a Friends of the Library bookstore dedicated in a little corner there. And they had, all the paperbacks were $1, but they didn't really have any paperbacks. And then they had a bunch of basically discarded library books for $2. All the hardbacks were $2. But there was a lot of book club editions, and so I got Joe Haldeman, Infinite Dreams, which is a collection of short stories. And these were all written like in the 70s by Haldeman. And so picked that up. Also got Slan by A.E. Van Vogt. These don't really have anything on the back, so I won't show them all off. But Damon Knight, The World of Thorin. This one actually does have a picture of our man Damon on the back. And then, you know, I picked up that Best of Randall Garrett, and I was looking up some more stuff on it. Apparently he was like a coach or mentor to Robert Silverberg, and he's most known for Lord Darcy. And a couple days before I went into this library, I was thinking, oh man, it would be cool to find some Lord Darcy books at some point. And this is an omnibus of the 3 main Lord Darcy books that he wrote, and there's a list of them there. And so I found this at the library. I almost missed it because they had it in the poetry section, but it caught my eye, and I was just really happy to find that. Then we got some from Clifford Simic. We got Enchanted Pilgrimage. We got Heritage of Stars. Sorry about the glare. I put Brodart dust jackets on all of these when I got home. And we got Waste Station, which this has got a pretty cool cover. There is an older version of this book that has a cover that I'd probably like a little bit more, but for $2 I couldn't pass that up. And then what I think was the best find from the Coeur d'Alene Library was Up the Walls of the World by James Tiptree Jr. And this one was just in really good shape. I've never seen this one out before. We got Alice Sheldon smoking a cigarette on the back. In case you don't know, that Alice Sheldon wrote under the pen name James Tiptree Jr. And she mostly wrote short stories, but this is one of the few novels she wrote. So I was really excited to find that. Okay, so now let's get into a bunch of paperbacks. Okay, so I'm going to try to go through this batch of paperbacks pretty quick. These I found all over between Coeur d'Alene and Spokane at bookstores, thrift stores. I paid between $1 and $3. There might have been a couple where I paid $4 for. And every bookstore I went to, I at least got a couple books. I passed up a lot of books that I either had or the condition was just too bad or they were asking too much, but the whole area had a lot of really good science fiction. And the first book I'm going to show you here is The Dolphins of Altair by Margaret St. Clair. And she wrote some really good short stories, apparently. This novel she wrote doesn't have the best reviews. This came from Dell, but I went ahead and picked that up. And then The Last Hurrah of the Golden Horde by Norman Spinrad. This is a collection of short stories. I did not have this one. It's not in the best condition, but this was at a bookstore for $1, and so I picked that up. Arthur C. Clarke, Islands in the Sky, and this one is from Signet. It was in really good shape. Larry Niven and Jerry Purnell, Inferno, and this is a Pocket Books Timescape edition. It's not in the best shape, but this one came from a thrift store for $1. The Forest of Peldane by Barrington J. Bailey. This is a daw, like a non-yellow spine daw. And there was a bunch of tape on this corner. And I pulled the tape off and removed the residue and turned out just fine. So happy with that one. The 10th annual edition of the Year's Best SF. This is edited by Judith Merrill. And these, if you find these out there, they have really good lists of authors in them. I've recently kind of found out about these. They were maybe not quite as known as some of the like Terry Carr and Dozois, but Judith Merrill was coming out with some really good anthologies back in the day. Alfred Bester, The Deceivers. This is from Tor, and this is kind of one of Bester's later novels he wrote. Not sure how great it is, but Got The Squares of the City by John Brunner. Now this is a first U.S. paperback from Ballantine in really good condition. So I was really happy to find that one. This was a thrift store find for $1. James Tiptree Jr., The Girl Who Was Plugged In. And this is like a Tor double, if you can see on the spine. And the other side has Vonda N. McIntyre's Screw Top. The biggest bummer for me is that this side has that giant barcode on it, but that's a great story. This is like really early cyberpunk, The Girl Who Was Plugged In. If you get a chance to read that story, it's really great. And then Connie Willis, Impossible Things. This is a collection of short stories. It was in really good shape, and I'll show a list of the stories that are in this one. And then Fred Saberhagen edited this collection called A Spadeful of Space-Time. And Saberhagen isn't really someone that's usually on my radar, but I popped it up, or opened it up, and this was at a thrift store for $1. And it's got a pretty good list of authors in here. And some of them like R.A. Lafferty and Edward Bryan, Chat Oliver, Roger Zelazny. So I picked that up. And then Robert Silverberg edited this collection, Alpha 6. And I have Alpha 9. But these are chocked full of really good authors. This is kind of like the American New Wave collections that were coming out. And if you look at that, I don't pass up on these Alpha anthologies now. It's got Spinrad and Bob Shaw and John Sladek and James Tiptree Jr., all kinds of good authors in there. Up the Line by Robert Silverberg. This is a Ballantine U.S. first edition of this book, and I did not have that one. And then Frederick Pohl and Jack Williamson, Wall Around a Star. This isn't the first book in this series. I think this is a trilogy that they wrote together. But I found that. Now, of course, I'll be looking for some others in that series. And then Black Star Rising. This was another from Pohl that I hadn't had. So I picked that up. Snow Crash by Neal Stephenson. This was $1 at a thrift store, and I had a trade paperback of it, so this will replace that big bulky trade paperback. And The Years of Rice and Salt by Kim Stanley Robinson. This is another one from Robinson I didn't have, so pick that up. Search the Sky by Frederick Pohl and C.M. Kornbluth. They wrote a bunch of books together. This is from Bantam. And I didn't have this one yet. So then Under the Green Star by Lynn Carter. I don't go out of my way for Lynn Carter books, but this is a Daw Yellow Spine. And it's a real early Daw number 30. So I went ahead and picked that one up. And then The Restaurant at the End of the Universe by Douglas Adams. I recently reread Hitchhiker's Guide and was asking people if I should move on with the series, and I found that for real cheap and might get around to reading that sometime soon. Wilson Tucker, Resurrection Days. This is another Timescape edition of Pocket Books, and so that was a cool one. Frederick Pohl and Thomas T. Thomas. This is Mars Plus, which is the sequel to Man Plus. And I read Man Plus. I really liked it. I haven't heard good things about this one, but I managed to find that for a really good price. Now, I didn't know much about this one. This is John D. MacDonald, Wine of the Dreamers, but I knew I had recognized that artwork from somewhere. And Centipede Press had done a book from Henry Kuttner and C.L. Moore, a collection of short stories called Two-Handed Engine, and I'll put a picture of it here. And they use the same artwork. This obviously came out before that, but I just thought that was pretty interesting, and I really like that artwork. And then The Malicia Tapestry by Brian Aldiss. This is a book I've seen before. It was in really good condition and found it at a thrift store for $1. and it's just got some great artwork on it. So I went ahead and picked that up. Bruce Sterling, Heavy Weather. There was probably the most disappointing bookstore. I was really struggling to find anything, and this is one of the books I grabbed just to kind of not leave empty-handed. That same bookstore also found The Legacy of the Heorot. So these were two I just grabbed kind of just because. But John from Sci-Fi Scavengers talked this one up quite a bit, so I'd like to read that at some point. Then Charles L. Harness, Chrono. He had written a bunch of stuff like back in the Golden Age, and then this came out a little bit later. So I'm kind of interested in maybe checking that out at some point. And let's see. Then we got a couple. I found these ended up finding these at different bookstores. But we've got Wind Child and Wild Dancers, and they ended up, they're a like a duology from R.M. Melich. I think that's how you pronounce her name. And it's Rebecca, and these are both from Signet. They were in really good shape, and I'd never heard of her, and sounds like they're kind of interesting, so might get around to reading that at some point. And then Charles Sheffield's Sight of Proteus. This was at a bookstore on their dollar rack as you walked in, and so I went ahead and picked that up. What Entropy Means to Me by George Alec Effinger from Signet. This is one of his most popular novels. Very interested in checking this out at some point. And we're on this home stretch here. Got The Wall Around Eden by Joan Slonczewski. And this book came out in 1990, and it has got great artwork. This one was in really good shape too. But you just didn't see a lot of books at this time coming out with such great artwork. I've read one book from hers, really enjoyed it, so really excited to read that one in the future. And then Dahlgren by Delaney. This book is a beast. It, with this white cover and everything. Usually this book is just so beat up. This was in pretty good condition. It's a 5th printing of this one. And I know this is a really challenging read. I don't know if I'm even going to like it, but at some point I got to give that one a shot. And then I went to this bookstore, and they had a lot of books that were laminated. And this one is Partners in Wonder. And I passed up on a lot of the laminated books because they had just kind of gotten trashed, and it kind of ruined them. But this one was in perfect condition. This is an Avon book. And it's real interesting because Harlan Ellison basically co-wrote a bunch of short stories with different authors in here. And I'll show you the list of the table of contents. And for some reason, this one managed to hold up, and it's in really good shape, even though it has that lamination over it. And then T.L. Sherrod, Alien Island. This is a Ballantine copy of this one. Sherrod is someone I'd never really heard of, and I read a collection of like nonfiction and essays by Barry Malzberg, and he was really talking T.L. Sherrod up, and I have a collection of his short stories, and this is like one of the few novels he wrote, so I was really happy to find that. And then last books here, I know I found some other ones, I can't remember exactly which ones, but there was a book a bookstore in Spokane called Giant Nerd Books, and it was great. They had all kinds of high-end books. They had science fiction, fantasy, occult, all kinds of crazy things. They knew the value of their books for the most part, but they had some really good deals for what I was looking for. I picked up this Invaders from the Infinite by John W. Campbell. This one I paid $4 for, and it's one of those, smaller format Ace books. I got Jack Vance, The Languages of Pow. This one was $5. So, like I said, they kind of had done some research. They knew some of these were a little more valuable. The Thousand Year Plan by Isaac Asimov. I didn't realize this was the abridged version of Foundation, but this Ace paperback that was issued for 35 cents, I paid $8 for this one. And then they had a copy of Zelazny's Dream Master, and this one I paid $5 for. But Chris over at Liminal Spaces, he did a video on this, and it kind of shot the value of these books up, and they're really hard to find, but the prices come way down. I thought this was maybe the first printing. It turns out it's a second printing. I already had it, and I didn't really take the time to look while I was in the bookstore. Okay, so this last set of books all came from a bookstore in Sandpoint, Idaho called the Corner Bookstore. And it was our second to the last day on our little trip, and we drove up there to check it out. The store was amazing. The owner, talked to him for quite a while. He had lived in California. He was huge into Dean Koontz and Dan Simmons. He had a glass case with all kinds of sign limited books and books that he got signed by the authors while he lived in California. He had a picture with him and Dean Koontz. He had met him, and he was just a great guy. He had moved to Sandpoint and took over a bookstore, ended up kind of adding his collection to the bookstore for sale. And I was going around and I found some just regular books on the regular shelves. And then my wife came over and said, "You got to check out this spinner rack." And this spinner rack was just full of books in these plastic sleeves, all vintage science fiction from the 60s and 70s, the exact kind of books I'm looking for. And wait till you see the condition of these things. Apparently a collector had come in a couple months prior and offloaded his whole collection to this bookstore. And the owner started going through them, and some things were priced really high. There was some Clark Ashton Smith books that were going for $50 to $75. There was some other science fiction that I think he had priced too high. But he had so many just priced at like $8.75. And if you bought 4 or more books, you got 20% off. So basically, I paid on average about $7 for all these books. And if that wasn't enough on the spinner rack, he said, "Oh, well, I have this whole nother section." And there was this whole bookshelf full of bagged vintage paperbacks. And it was just amazing. I ended up buying a bunch the first day. We ended up going back the second day because I was having nightmares about leaving books behind. I almost felt bad for buying so many, but the owner was really encouraging me to buy more. He was kind of joking around, like handing me books, like, "You should buy this one." And I still ended up, leaving 100 or hundreds of books behind. This collector had just an amazing collection. But first off, I was just going through the regular aisles and I found Dan Simmons, The Hollow Man. All these were just a couple bucks each. I got Macro Life by George Zebrowski, which is a book I'd been looking for. It was in pretty good shape. Got The Skylark of Space by E. Doc Smith, just so I can hang on to this paperback and get rid of the big trade paperback version of that I had. And then Ron Goulart, Shaggy Planet. These were just like regular books on his shelves, and they were all around $2 or $2.50. The rest of these were all came from this collector. They were all bagged, and they're all in great shape. So I got The Missionaries by D.G. Compton. This is a Ace Science Fiction special, even though it doesn't say it. And I got most of my information on that series from Richard at Vintage SF. Now, I had a list of some authors that I was trying to hunt down that I'd never really heard of, but I'd heard some things recently about. So Daniel F. Galui, Lords of the Psychon. This is from Bantam Books. And it just happened that he had a couple books from this author. A Scourge of Screamers. I know nothing about this author. I looked up these books after I bought them. It sounds interesting. J.G. Ballard, The Voices of Time and Other Stories. And this is a Bantam Books. Or no, this is a Berkeley. Got Judith Merrill. She edited Path into the Unknown, the best of Soviet science fiction. And this is from Dell. I had just finished Roadside Picnic by the Strugatsky brothers. And so this one just kind of had me interested, and there's a list of the authors in there. Nova by Samuel R. Delany, and this is the true first paperback from Bantam. You'll see a lot of, there's a certain livery that a lot of Delany books had, but as far as I can tell, that predates that one. And then we got The Iron Dream by Norman Spinrad, and this is the Avon true first U.S. paperback version of this one in just stunning condition. One of the most pristine books I've ever seen, Alfred Bester, The Dark Side of the Earth from Signet. And this is a collection of short stories. This thing is just in immaculate condition. It's so sharp. Just opening it up, you can tell no one's even really barely opened it. I don't even want to crack it too much, but it's got some really great short stories. One of his most famous, The Men Who Murdered Muhammad, is in here. Then we got a couple from Silverberg, Conquerors from the Darkness from Dell. And this one is in really great shape. But one that I was even more excited for is The World Inside. And this is the Signet edition of this one. This is the first U.S. paperback of this one. And it's just in amazing shape. Even he must have had these climate control, because there's no yellowing in these or anything. It's just, when are you going to find books in this condition? We Can Build You by Philip K. Dick. This was the only Philip Dick book he had. I was really hoping that there would be some authors like Le Guin or some others, but I'll take what I can get. Margaret St. Clair, The Dancers of Noyo. This is an ace science fiction. Another from St. Clair that I got. Looking up the reviews, it doesn't seem like she was maybe the best novel writer, more of a short story writer, but we'll have to see. The Shores of Another Sea by Chad Oliver. This has just got a fantastic cover. This is from Signet. And Matt over at Science Fiction Reads was talking about this one, so I'm really excited to read this. I think this will probably be the first Chad Oliver book that I'll read. And we got A Spectre is Haunting Texas by Fritz Leiber. This is another Bantam edition, real old copy of this one. I believe I looked this up, and I think this is the true first paperback from Bantam that came out in 1971. And some of these Leiber books are hard to come by. And then another Spinrad, The Men in the Jungle. This is from Avon, and this is the first U.S. paperback of this one. I didn't have this book yet. And then Frederick Pohl, A Plague of Pythons from Ballantine Books. And then one that I just love the cover of from Frederick Pohl, The Age of Pussyfoot. And this is a Ballantine edition of this one. Just in perfect condition. You'll hear me say that a lot. Now this is one I was really excited to find. The Mueller-Folker Effect by John Sladek. These Sladek books are very hard to find. I've been kind of on the lookout for some of his stuff for quite a while. You can, even online, they're hard to come by. And now we got, let's see. We got The Phoenix in the Mirror by Avram Davidson. I know there's another one from Davidson in this. A bunch of these all towards the end here, all these Ace Science Fiction specials. The Year of the Quiet Sun by Wilson Tucker. This is one I'm going to be reading very soon. It's part of the Masterpieces of Science Fiction series that I'm reading through. Got another from John Sladek, Mechasm. And this is going on the TBR for next month, or maybe even this month if I can fit it in. So look for a review of this one coming out really soon. Sounds really interesting to me. 1 Million Tomorrows by Bob Shaw. Another one by D.G. Compton, or a couple here. We got The Silent Multitude. It's got some great artwork. All of these had artwork by Leo and Diane Dillon, as is noted on the back. Chronicles, which isn't a science fiction special, but you know, they kind of went to a different livery for part of the series for some reason. Okay, and then Palace of Eternity by Bob Shaw. I had a copy that was in pretty good shape, but this one is just in very fine condition, and so I basically upgraded my copy with that. And then After Things Fell Apart by Ron Goulart. This is one that I didn't have yet. Here's the other one by Avram Davidson, The Island Under the Earth. And then these last three are all from R.A. Lafferty. We got Passmaster. We got Fourth Mansions. And then one that I'm really excited for, 900 Grandmothers. So yeah, this was quite the find. I was pretty excited. It was one of those deals where you just, every time you go into a bookstore, you're hoping to find something like this. The guy knew what the books were worth to a point. He kind of started, he said he started going through and looking them up, and then just took, there was too many books. He said he marked them all $8.75 and put them on the shelf. After the discount, like I said, I paid basically $7 for most of these books, but I just couldn't resist. I probably went a little overboard, but it was a blast, and I got a lot of great books to add to my collection now. So I am going to do another book haul for this month, because there were some other books that I had found outside of this trip that I wanted to kind of show off and read next month. So look for another book haul coming out in a few weeks or in a week or so. And other than that, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.